How's it going, guys? JPEG Penguin here. I know this video might be very late to the party, and I should have probably made this at least like a week ago. But I'm gonna make this video showing you guys the best and the worst that the eShop, the 3DS eShop has to offer. This is a 3DS channel, as you guys know, so let's just get right into it. Okay, so like a lot of the other video game or 3DS channels have been suggesting, you should for sure buy all the free demos, all the free videos and apps if you have the space for it. If you have the SD card, if you have the the space, I say do those first. These are things. I mean, these are probably things you can find online. But there's certain apps and even videos, I guess, or especially demos that are only exclusive to the 3DS. You want to make sure you get those. Those are all they cost nothing. They're free. And alongside that, you also want to make sure that all of your physical copies are updated, because I'm not sure if it's because all of the video game updates. They occur through the eShop, and there's no telling any other way to get those updates. So, especially for a multiplayer game, if your systems aren't updated, or if your friends' systems aren't updated, you actually won't be able to play multiplayer. If say one is updated, one person's 3DS and game is updated, and the other person's isn't. So you guys want to make sure you get everything that's pretty much free. All the other channels have already talked about it, but I'm just reiterating it again. And the next generalization is it's for the collectors. No, it's to collect or buy all the 3DS and DSi exclusives. DSiWare exclusives is what I mean. Just to keep a piece of the DS history. I know some games, the port for the DS is like a million times better, like Donkey Kong Country Returns. But you could probably look this one up if you wanted to get all the exclusives, or if you wanted to know about all the exclusives for the 3DS and the DSiWare, especially the DSiWare, because that is software that is very old, like 2008 when the first DSi came out. That's probably some of the oldest software ever, and probably will never be able seen again. It's software that you'll probably never ever be able to play through without actually buying the software on the 3DS or DSi. I mean, you can't go buy it on the DSi anymore, but make sure if you're a collector of like video games and video game software, be sure to buy all of the 3DS and DSiWare exclusives. And without further ado, let's jump into what I think are some of the best downloadable softwares, and also some of the more obscure softwares that I found on the eShop for the 3DS. And keep in mind, this is in no particular order. Be sure to look at these games before the eShop finally closes. So we're gonna start off our to-buy list with Escape 3, The Tower of Destiny. A lot of games get a little convoluted with their mechanics. Sometimes they get a little excessive, especially JRPGs. There's a lot of like stats or monsters or elements or like weaknesses and resistances to keep in mind when you're playing these kind of games. But the beautiful thing about Escape 3 is that it's simple and straightforward. It's a dungeon crawler hack and slash. It's just a really fun game. It has an internet ranking system, which is kind of interesting. Not something I imagine would be updated in the next like 5 to 10 years. These things, the internet capabilities of these 3DS softwares is gonna run out eventually. But Escape 3 is definitely something you should look into if you're looking for a dungeon crawling action game. Next we have Little Red Riding Hood's Zombie Barbecue. This is a really intense game. You get to use the touchscreen, and you use the buttons to move around, and you basically have to shoot all the zombies that get in your path. alongside zombie bosses and weird other Japanese style bosses. It's really strange. The gameplay gets especially super hectic and almost kind of technical, but like physically technical. You gotta make sure you got pinpoint precision with your shooting, with your movement. You gotta make sure you're keeping enough health, especially in hard and extreme mode. This game is crazy. Zombie Barbecue is definitely one of the harder but more rewarding video games, I'd say, in the eShop. Now, a Kappa's Trail is pretty daunting because at first glance, it looks like a whimsical, nice, beautiful, everything about it is very calming, especially in the hub world, where you get to explore all of your collectibles, and you get to see your progress made, and there's even a Kappa's diary in there. But once you get to the gameplay, it gets crazy. You really have to be on point with your timing, with your movement. You gotta, the gameplay is dragging across the touchscreen and blazing a trail for your Kappa pal. And you gotta make sure that you don't get touched by the demon hand. The demon hand is the craziest of the whole game. It is a one-hit kill and will take you all the way to the beginning of the game. And despite all of the insane micromanagement that you have to do in a Kappa's Trail, it still comes out to be a really loving and very hopeful kind of game. The gameplay gets really intense, especially again in the later levels, as it should. But the hub world is just so relaxing. You get to listen to the ambient music underwater, and you even have a goldfish buddy. If you think you've got the bravery and the skill to play a Kappa's Trail, you should definitely pick this one up. In Dracula Undead Awakening, it is only you are the sole survivor. You have to face a large horde of zombies, werewolves, Draculas, and maybe even something called vampire brides. It's so crazy. There's also snow worms and vampire and little bats that try to kill you. You have to shoot them as they come. They're an oncoming horde. There's different kinds of stages and levels that you can choose in the beginning of the title screen, and it's one of the most intense gaming sessions you'll ever have in such a short amount of time. It's one of those games where you try to just survive as long as you can, and as the longer you survive, the faster, the more HP, and the more damage the enemies have. It may seem like a game with silly graphics, like nothing too crazy about how it looks, but you're gonna be scratching at the bottom screen like a psychomaniac, just trying to fend off all the crazy monsters that are gonna be coming at you. By the time the game ends, you'll feel like you've just woken up from a dream. Like you're just in shock and you realize you're not in actual danger. Now we come to Dragon's Wrath. One of the more relaxed games than the ones I've already talked about. It is about a dragon trying to get his gold back from a bunch of thieves. As you progress through the game, you get to upgrade your abilities, you get to fight stronger enemies, and it's just a really kind of surreal kind of gameplay with this one. You get to destroy houses, enemy warfare, and the enemies themselves, all with your fire breath. It's like you're playing a real dragon. You really get to play at your own pace with this game, but you just gotta make sure that you don't run out of health or power, or else the game is over. This one's just a nice game to kind of relax on, and it gives an interesting anti-trope where usually the people are the heroes and the dragon is the villain and people are out to slay the dragon. But in this game, it's the exact opposite. The dragon must get his gold back from the evil humans. Fractured Soul is platforming hell. On top of defeating enemies and overcoming obstacles, you have to do that in 2 screens, the top and bottom screen. And on top of that, you have to switch in between. You get to switch your physical character in between the top and bottom screen. With the need to focus on two screens to get to the end of the level, this is hands down one of the hardest platformers on the 3DS. This game is not for the faint of heart, and if you don't like falling or losing a lot, you should probably go back to playing Mario. But if you know you're that hardcore gamer, then this is one you should definitely try out.
Select mission.
So Kokuga is really cool because it's just like battle tanks, but it's a lot more futuristic and you get a lot of weapons right from the start. You get a bunch of weapons you can use and select in the bottom screen. Apply them to your attacks and then just go for it. Destroy every enemy in your path. But the number one reason why this is one of the best eShop title games right now for the 3DS is because it also has download play, 3DS download play. Extremely rare for any 3DS game, really. You could just have this one copy of Kokuga and 3 other of your friends can play alongside you by using download play. Download play is really the number one seller here. Kokuga turned into such a great game just playing with one other friend at such a cheap price as well. Download play is just such a great feature to have, and coupled with action-packed gameplay, Kokuga is definitely one you should have in your 3DS. And now, we're taking a step back and taking it easy with Globalow's Party and its whimsical world. It has a ton of minigames based on momentum movement. You trace a path and then you watch your Globalow's buddy go. You can play minigames like soccer, snooker, tic-tac-toe, racing, and so many more unique games based on the Globalos themselves. But the most interesting part of Globalow's Party on the 3DS is that not only does it have a download play, but you can play the game with another person on the same system. All you have to do is make a trace path for your Globalos, take turns, and you actually get to play all of the mini-games on one system. This is honestly the only time I've ever seen a multiplayer game be played on one system and with one controller. It has such happy gameplay, and you should definitely pick this up if you like to game on the go. And the last game on the good list is Persona Q. Persona is just legendary for its combination of turn-based combat, lifestyle NPCs, and colorful but edgy appearances. This could probably be said for all the Persona games, but Persona Q is turn-based combat perfected. Not only perfected, but improved. Random encounters in this game do get a little annoying, but dungeon crawling is so engaging as you write notes and paths on the bottom screen to mark your progress throughout the game. This game has so much content, I'd say just buying Persona Q, you'd be set for like 2 to 3 years of awesome 3DS gameplay. I'd say this game goes head to head with Pokemon and Fire Emblem, and it's definitely the reason why you should buy this before the eShop closes. Some of the honorable mentions I didn't talk about, but will include are games like Touch Battle Tank, Picton 2, the Shantae series, Undead Storm, Radio Hammer, the Ninja Sagumaru series, the Mutant Mud series, Mighty Milky Way, Castle Conqueror Against, The Legend of Dark Witch, the first one, the Gunman Clive series, Shovel Knight, and Fluidity Spin Cycle. Okay, now we're gonna get into the games to avoid. Just kidding, you can get these if you want, but I would avoid these games. Just as a blanket statement, I'd say avoid all games that you can get available as hard copies. Of course, I'd say it's easier to play hard copies of a video game than a digital version. A lot of the times, you'll actually find the hard copies of the games cheaper, like in local retailers or like GameStop. Digital software is locked into one account of a single 3DS. Even if you were to like account transfer everything into another 3DS, there's still that possibility that if your 3DS dies, the video games on it will die with it. If there's a game you want and you can't find a physical copy of it, or you don't want to order it online or anything like that, you don't have to take this into consideration, but a lot of the times the hard copies of video games are always going to be better than the digital copies. More accessible for sure. Also, another round of games to avoid is to avoid all games that are available upon emulation. Technically, this is possible for every game, but for the really, really old games like the SNES games on the 3DS, or like Pokemon Red, Blue, Crystal, Yellow that are available on the 3DS shop, these are really simple, small file games that you can honestly emulate yourself either on your phone or in your computer, and it's free. It's basically free. So you really should try to avoid those games, because there's other outlets that you can access to get these games, especially the small file games. Of course, I understand the Pokemon games, you can transfer them into your Pokemon bank and then transfer that into like another system, which I understand that you can do that if you'd like. But again, a lot of the older games, like even Donkey Kong, those games can be emulated, and I'd say you can save a lot more money just doing that instead of just buying the games on the 3DS. Also, this one might be a little obvious too, but also avoid games that are also available on the Switch, if you have a Switch, of course, because it's always going to be a better version on the newest console than an older console, unless you want that nostalgic feeling and maybe even portability of a 3DS. Just make sure you get the best port of a version. So our first game to avoid is Stella Glow. Stella Glow was on sale at some point, and I'm a sucker. I got sucked into the sale. I wanted to see its majesty. It turned out to be a JRPG, but not a very fun or engaging JRPG compared to what we have today. For most of the gameplay, it uses story time novelization, and to me, the dialect between the characters and their thoughts is really bland and non-inspired. A lot of the intense moments in the games never really captured my attention. It just didn't seem that dire a lot of the time in the story. I'm also not a fan of the chibi 3D animated models. Like during the storytime dialect, they're all 2D models, and they look fine, but I don't like in the dungeon area, they turn into these small chibi guys, and it just looks silly. It just doesn't look good. The big drawbacks of this game is really just its boring characters and its boring story. You even get a job and you get to interact with more NPCs, but the dialogue is just not very interesting. All the characters talk to each other in a really polite way, and somehow they feel disconnected from each other. There's even times during the novelization where some parts of the dialogue will be voice acted, like during the game, and then some parts of it will not be, and it just jumps back and forth all willy-nilly. The game was designed to commemorate Image Epoch's 10-year anniversary, but they should have spent less time celebrating and more time creating meaningful characters instead. So, avoiding Gurumin 3D may be a bit controversial. It's an action-packed 3D platformer with a lot of colorful characters, honestly really good, meaningful dialogue. But halfway through the game, the gameplay itself starts to crumble on itself. It's probably just this port of Gurumin, but 3D platforming gets really, really imprecise. A lot of the times you'll just get frustrated and wonder whether it was the game's fault or you had done something wrong and you're not completely sure what happened. I understand that this is a bit of a reboot from the Gurumin in 2004, but you would think they would clean out some of the bugs before they released it on the 3DS. I said before that you should be playing games on its most superior port or emulation, but Gurumin 3D doesn't count because it was marketed as a brand new game when it was first released on the 3DS. Just don't worry too much about missing on this one because it's still readily available on Steam. Eternal Blade on the 3DS just looks bad. The attack controls are stiff, your character moves around like a robot, but most importantly, there is little conveyance as to what you're supposed to be doing or where you're supposed to go. The 3DS has a massive library of 2D platformers that just outclass Eternal Blade. Its time rewind mechanic isn't as impressive as it sounds, since most of the time you'll just be rewinding back your health from bogus enemy encounters. And even if you get past all the gameplay, you'll probably get stuck with the game giving you no clues on how to progress. I mean, this game went from $16.99 to $2.99 on sale, so that should ring up some red flags, especially since it's not from a well-known franchise like Phoenix Wright or Resident Evil. You'd be better off just playing Mario. And now we come to Moko Friends. From first glance, it looks like Pokemon combined with pink and whimsical frothiness, but the title screen and intro is as imaginative as the game will ever be. Once you pass the beginning, it's just nothing but turn-based combat of the same enemies over and over again. The other half of the gameplay is dungeon exploring, much like Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, but far more simplified and not at all creative like Persona Q. All you do is battle monsters, then go to a villager in the hub world, ask if they want something from a dungeon, and you go, rinse and repeat. The character dialect will drain your IQ, since a lot of the time the characters are just bumbling around and hardly ever talk about the game's universe. The turn-based combat is so bland that there's an auto battle feature to help you graze through the game without actually engaging in the fights. I've seen this game recommended the most in the eShop closure videos as of late, but you really do not want to spend $20 to get a nothing sandwich. Rest assured that this is one of those games that won't ever be mixed. And that's going to cover the bulk of the games that you should avoid. Some dishonorable mentions that you need to talk about are Sakura 3D, Ice Station Z, the Heavy Fire series, Undead Storm Nightmare, Code of Princess, Mighty Switch Force, Liberation Maiden, the Witch and Hero series, Brave Dungeon, and the Sanran Kagura series. Ultimately, it's up to you whether you want a specific game downloaded from the eShop. If you watch my gameplay videos, you'll know that I'm a fan of difficult games, so something casual like Moko Friends isn't something I enjoy, and don't let my tastes completely change your opinion. Just be sure to check out more gameplay videos about a game you want before making the purchase. This is Pengu 3DS, signing out.